call our names from the deepest alleys of their throats. How could we, when our mothers raised us warriors, not children? When our grandparents hung their metal keys on walls and said, "This is for when you return."
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Maine to New York City and points west. An Israeli court convicted an Israeli Jew for 3 murders and 2 attempted murders. Amram Ben Uliel threw a firebomb into the home of a sleeping Palestinian family, killing a father and infant immediately, and the mother after she suffered for weeks. The crime took place 5 years ago. We're just now getting a verdict. I remember what the Israeli right said 5 years ago. Oh, it was probably a dispute between Arabs that led to the firebombing. One reason that it took so long for Ben Uliel to get a verdict was because he was tortured. He was tortured as if he was a Palestinian. And his relatives and lawyers brought it up, and the Israeli judge actually believed that a Jewish man could be tortured. So they had to wait a while before getting another confession out of him. With a good deal of sarcasm, Haaretz correspondent or columnist Gideon Levy wrote, "When a firebomb is thrown into the home of an innocent sleeping family, one can no longer cover up, obscure, suppress, or deny, even if the victims are Palestinians, even in Israel." These weren't soldiers shooting a girl with scissors, a brigade commander shooting a fleeing teenager, or settlers who burn fields and attack shepherds. In these instances, there was no choice. There had to be an investigation, a trial, and even a punishment. Needless to say, Ben Uliel's family home was not destroyed, as it would have been if the case had been a Palestinian killing Israeli Jews. Now, a poem to Palestine, birth certificate on its 72nd year of occupation and division, delivered by Zoom.
لا يموت اللاجئون كما قالت يوما صديقة لي. Refugees do not die, a friend once told me. لا يموت اللاجئون، لا يموت المنفيون، لا يموت المناضلون. The exiled do not die, the occupied do not die. Today is May 15th, and I'm writing the 72nd birth certificate of my homeland. My homeland, she too does not die. My homeland, she has never, and she will never. My homeland, she walks, crippled on the stage of the world, with a cane made of olive branches and blood. "72 years under occupation. 72 years sieged, caged, raped. 72 years they've been trying to write her obituary. Palestine, unfounded, 0 years old, barely an infant, alone near a cliff, a land void of people and history. 72 years they've been trying to write her obituary. 72 years they've been trying to erase us from memory. The old will die and the young will forget, they said. But here we are. We have not died and we will never forget. How could we? How could we, when our orchards call our names from the deepest alleys of their throats? How could we, when our mothers raised us warriors, not children? When our grandparents hung their middle keys on walls and said, "This is for when you return. This is so you return." How could we, when we carried home to every refugee camp, restitched our cities, and memorized our maps? How could we, when we are still standing like our trees, like Masjid al-Aqsa, like statues of suffering and remembrance? This is not about hate. This is about loss. About the borders slashing in half our streets. Our minds about the shackles in our hearts. This is about Palestine and what it means to define ourselves by the very thing we lost. About searching for a presence amidst the absence. This is about 1948, about breaking the hands of time. This is about a land older than our eyes and yours, about a language older than tongues. This is a birth certificate for a homeland that doesn't die, a homeland that only knows how to live and live and live. Palestine, millions of years old. 2,400 square miles missing, 10,952 whole. 5.7 million hearts beating within, nearly 7 million calling your name without. لا يموت اللاجئون، لا يموت المنفيون، لا يموت المختتون.
فلسطين 72 عاماً على نكبتنا، ولا زلنا هنا بلحمنا ودمنا وبياراتنا وزيتوننا وخبزنا ومساجدنا وكنائسنا وشوارعنا وهتافاتنا. فلسطين لا يموت اللاجئون، لا يموت المنفيون، ولا يمكن أن يموت أي من يرزخ تحت احتلال.
In southwest Syria, Daraa is threatened with a military assault by Assad forces, Iranian troops, and Iranian puppet forces. Daraa had agreed to submit to Assad, but it had never been conquered. Instead, there was a deal with the regime brokered by Putin. Now Assad threatens it. In response, there was a nighttime demonstration in Tafas.
here because we support the family and the people of Iran, and we know the regime, the Iranians, Shabiha, are trying to come back into Iran, and we support the people of Syria and their quest to keep the regime out of their homes.
At a certain time on the 21st, there was a Twitter storm. Many people tweeted with selfies of themselves holding a sign that included the hashtag #ActForDaraa. It's not too late for you to do your own original selfie and send it out now. Last week we showed you a bit of the updated website, SaudiUS.org. Today we do the same for RPM.world. First the old website, then the new. It's much easier to get around, and you click on the focus button to see the issues in its main focus. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, a 9-year-old policy that barred the U.S. from doing business with a Saudi Arabian division of a British firm, which had pled guilty to fraud in a multi-billion-dollar arms deal in 2010, which might have been the most corrupt arms deal in history. This policy has been canceled by the Trump administration. I'm sure you're all shocked. For the 9th week in a row, millions of Americans have filed new unemployment claims. The total now is a staggering 38.5 million. A new study by the Robert Woods Foundation has estimated that some 25 million people will lose the health insurance that they got through their employer. I remember those wise old politicians who rejected Medicare for all, saying workers love the insurance that they were getting through their employer. Well, now tens of millions of those workers have lost that insurance. It's time to get rid of the creaky, collapsed system and replace it with one where health care is free at the point of service and paid for by federal taxes. Oh, but how would we pay for such a thing? Well, maybe you could tax the billionaires. Through the pandemic, so far, their wealth has gone up and up. On May 22nd, Business Insider reported that since mid-March, billionaire wealth has gone up $434 billion. In mid-May, a Health Care Emergency Guarantee Act was filed in Congress. It basically says that during the coronavirus emergency, the government would pay all health care bills. If it passes, it would be a good first step. For more about this, see peace.org. Now to some working people helping each other out. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, Bridgeport Mutual Aid has brought 1,000 grocery deliveries to people in need. Just before we talk about the next climate action in Connecticut, we have more of the virtual rally on climate held over Zoom on April 25th. First, we'll hear from Martha Klein, who volunteers with the Sierra Club. We're going to call next on Martha Klein. Martha Klein is a nurse and an environmentalist who volunteers for the Sierra Club, Connecticut. She's a leading activist in the fight to oppose the fracked gas expansion in Connecticut. Martha Klein, take it away.
Hi, Stan. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So the talk that I'm about to give should be titled The Keystone Export Limited Pipeline, a disaster that already exists, but could get much, much worse. So the first thing to notice about this project is that its name is the Keystone Export Limited Pipeline. That word export is right in there. And here's a couple things I want you to know about it. It already exists. Phase 1 through 3 of this project are already in operation. The length of this pipeline that already exists is 2,972 miles, and it travels from Hardisty, Alberta in Canada, all the way to Houston, Texas. The cost to build phases 1 through 3 was approximately $5 billion. The owner is TransCanada Pipeline, or TC Energy, which is based in Alberta, Canada. The next thing to know is the debate that's currently raging is over phase 4 of the Keystone XL pipeline. This phase 4 that has not yet been built would be 1,179 miles. It travels from Hardisty, Alberta in Canada to Steel City, Nebraska. The cost to build this one would be about $7 billion. And it's a redundant pipeline because if you look at the map, they've already got in phase 1 through 3, they already got from Alberta, the tar sands of Alberta, down to in this same location in Nebraska. But they want to build this one, this redundant one, because the route would be slightly shorter and because it would be a larger diameter pipeline. And it would, whereas phase 1 through 3 travels through Alberta, Saskatchewan, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Phase 4, the one currently under debate, would only travel through Alberta, Saskatchewan, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Another thing to note is that the history of this pipeline is fraught with mismanagement. One could perhaps say corruption. So it goes all the way back to 2005. The resistance didn't happen for a while because, of course, it was below the radar like all these things are. It wasn't until it was already phase 1 was operational in 2010 that the EPA criticized Hillary Clinton's State Department for their draft environmental impact statement, which neglected spill safety and greenhouse gas emissions. So then the State Department hemmed and hawed from 2011 till 2014. Obama approved it in 2012. Then in 2015, Secretary of State Kerry did a really good thing. He said the project was not in the public interest. 3 days later, Obama rejected the pipeline, phase 4. And then in 2017, in the first week of office, Trump revived it. And in March 2019, Trump issues a new permit, which kind of made moot the numerous lawsuits and so forth that were up against the old permits just by issuing a new permit. So what happened then was in April 2020, a federal judge in Montana revoked a key water permit that had been issued by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for failing to assess impact on endangered species. What I want to point out about this project is the finances stink. So very recently, the Premier of Alberta announced just this year that he's going to invest $7 billion of Canadian dollars of taxpayer money in this project, which tells you they can't get the private financing they need. And then TC Energy announced they'll proceed with construction on March 31st of this year in the middle of a viral pandemic. And then shortly thereafter, the federal judge in Montana issued the order against it. So it really, what I just want to say in closing about this is that what this project represents is absolutely everything that we are fighting against. We're fighting against this relationship between government and industry. So the fact is the government has approved this at every point along the line, and we've seen very similar things in Connecticut. For example, the fact that DEEP right now is issuing permits for the Killingly power plant during a pandemic. What we're seeing is that a lot of these projects to a certain extent are being built for export, or if not for export, then for profit, for industry. And it's all based on plunder of the public's resources for the benefit of private wealth. And in closing, I want to say, stay safe, stay home. I'm done. That's all.
Thank you so much. So much good information there. The next climate action will be a car caravan on late Friday afternoon on June 5th. It'll pass by DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. DEEP can deny permits and thus can stop the building of fracked gas plants. Watch our show next week for details. Speaking of the proposed Killingly plant, there's an excellent article on the burden of water cleanup of toxic metals that would be needed in the town of Killingly if that plant is built. It was published in the Hartford Courant. It's linked to at peace.org. Go to the site, click on resources, and then on the archive, Climate and Nature. Or you can find it among the tweets at CT Climate. Please retweet it at GovNedLamont. Now, Anthony Cherolis speaking about transportation and climate. We are going to go now to Anthony Cherolis. He's Transport Hartford Coordinator at the Center for Latino Progress. He has a background in aerospace engineering, but he left Pratt & Whitney we're getting a screen share here. He left Pratt & Whitney to do community focus work in Hartford near his home in 2015. And now Anthony is working on equitable transit and active transportation issues at the Center's Transport Hartford Academy. Go ahead, Anthony.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for taking time today on our generation's greatest challenge. Connecticut's transportation system is by far our state's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. If you're online, you'll see the graphic showing 38% of the state's emissions are from the transportation sector. Beyond the climate emergency, the transportation sector pollutants put those with the least resources at higher risk of respiratory issues, including death from the coronavirus. The economic and environmental injustice that sentences a child born in Hartford's northeast neighborhood to a 15-year shorter expected lifespan than a child born in nearby West Hartford just cannot continue. The coronavirus tragedy must be taken as an opportunity here to respond with system-level changes that reduce emissions from the state's transportation sector. In times of disruption, we can join together in coalition and force changes that were previously ignored or stymied by those benefiting from the unsustainable status quo. First and foremost, the state needs to stop expanding interstates and state routes. It seems insane as we confront the climate crisis, but our state legislators passed a bonding bill in early 2020 that includes interstate expansion projects on both I-84 and I-95. There are many proven ways, I've got a slide up now. There are many proven ways that Connecticut and the larger Northeast region can reduce driving trips and emissions, including the proposed Cap and Invest Transportation and Climate Initiative. To learn more about these opportunities and to work with a large coalition to make this change, follow the short link that I've got on the slide or snap a photo of the QR code. I'll also put the link into the chat. And I want to thank you for your time and for being with us here today. And let's keep up this momentum. Thank you very much.
Do these graphs include methane? I know it says GHG emissions, but to double check, thank you. Just a quick review.
For the percentage emissions chart that I had up, I don't know if that includes methane. that would be like leakages in transportation to power plants. I don't know if that's included. The way that DEEP currently keeps track of emissions is a bit primitive in that it doesn't include life cycle emissions. So the production and manufacturing emissions for a lot of the products we use in Connecticut aren't captured. Those are just the emissions, the actual things that come out. I think it does include methane leaks, since that would be an emission that happens inside the state, but I'm not for certain.
Thank you, Tony. And thanks for all your comments. That's our program for today. Remember to stay safe, but stay active. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.